It's those masks. It's what preceded them.
No, okay, that wasn't a post-9. There was something that happened after that a couple of years, and I don't remember what it was. But there was, it was like there's an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I mean, not DS9. Whenever they think the changelings have made it to Earth, and they declare martial law and all of that. It was like, you can't make that show after 9/11. It has to have been made before then. They think the change.
Sorry, just testing the feed.
To Earth, and they declare martial law and all of that. It was like
just blew your brain. You can't hear yourself talk 90 seconds later.
Oh yeah, and then there was some other event that happened after V for Vendetta, and it was like, you go back and you look at that thing through it was the national, what was it called, the Patriot Act. So look at the Patriot Act through that movie, and it's kind of a chilling thought. So,
well, what's the movie that just came out? Basically, it's an anarchy movie. I keep seeing it on Netflix. I can't remember what it's called. The Gathering or something like that. The Purge. That's it. The Purge.
Oh yeah, there's been like 3 of them.
Yeah.
Now. So I haven't seen the third one yet, but the first one was actually kind of good, and the second one was like, hey, anybody got an extra day? We're gonna throw something out here to make money. And
so this, I don't know anything about that, but it was creepy masks and anarchy, and so that made me think of it.
But the premise of the Purge is the American society was breaking down almost to total anarchy. So the new founding fathers, and this kind of the promos you hear in the background, they created this thing where there is a 12-hour period every day where there is no law, and so everything is legal: murder, rape, robbery, or whatever. And that is called the Purge. So you hide behind these, you secure yourself as best you can.
That's a Star Trek episode.
Through it.
Wow.
That was a Star Trek episode where every night there was lawlessness. Remember the original Star Trek?
Oh, and then there's this ancient white box that's a supercomputer thing. And no, not what is it? Landu? Something?
I don't know. I'm looking for it. Oh, this is going to bother me. I'm not nuts. You remember this, right? Star Trek, the original series. There was a place where, like, every night you were allowed to do whatever you wanted to do. Wait, here we go. Mere Anarchy. Wait for it, Google. No, that's a book. No, come on. Oh, this is going to bother me from now on.
Yeah, okay. That is the Archon. It's about the Archon. Landru, I think, is the name of the show. Or no, that's the computer in it. Episode 22, Return of the Archons. So Landru allowed them a red hour as their only outlet for violent emotional release.
There it is.
So,
yeah, it was Wild Wild West meets Star Trek. Yeah, Return of the Archons. Thank you. So it was just an hour. It wasn't all night.
All right.
The red hour. Okay, I feel better now. So that whole Purge movie was lifted directly from Star Trek, the original series. You're welcome.
I'm sure they got it from somewhere else.
Probably.
There's probably some Greek play.
Asimov book. Yeah,
Euripides, lost manuscript, the gods.
All right, let me do my preemptive reboot. We'll start our recordings, and we'll go.
All right.
That would have been great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the YouTube feed, so anybody who bothers to watch that will see it.
There's a great show title. That would have been great intro stuff.
I'm using a little bit of different audio gear this week. I've got a new DBX 266 compressor.
Oh, that's exactly the same one I use. I love it.
Yeah, they're nice and quick, and I'm hoping I'm running this thing properly. But I've tested it thoroughly, and it sounds pretty decent. And I've changed my recording to a very simplified MP3 recorder that doesn't drive my computer crazy. So,
Right.
end result, I'm hoping I get a better quality file to send you. So,
Actually, I have the 166. The 266 is in a box. I like the 166 better.
oh yeah, they're hard to get, aren't they? Those
Yes.
166s.
Yes.
Yeah.
Vintage gear. All of
Yep.
my stuff, it's now vintage. When I bought it, it was used. So you hang on to it long enough, it becomes vintage.
I used to use one of those LA ones. They were from the 1960s.
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
tube-based compressors. Oh my God, they're worth a lot of money now. I think you can't get one under $5,000.
I've got a bass effects pedal for my bass guitar that somebody ripped the chip out of and soldered a fuse into place for. And it's unique and it sounds amazing.
Oh yeah.
Welcome back to the art of podcasting.
Sorry. All right. So let's just go with this. There's stuff in the thing. We haven't seen each other for 3 weeks. I just want to go with it and capture the chemistry, capture the magic.
All
Everybody-
right, I am recording.
Awesome. And away we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GeekRant, episode 267. A little information is a dangerous thing? Recorded January 8th, 2017, and brought to you by Element Opie Productions. ElementOpie.com. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new year of the only show on the internet where people rant. That's it. Nobody else rants. No geeks, anyway, except right here. I am your host, Mark, the Sultan of the Soapbox Cockerel, and joining me this week, as always, are your two stalwart co-hosts, Seth, the Gooey Kid Anderson, and Miles, the Oxygeneer Wakeham. Hey, gentlemen.
Howdy, and we've not missed a show this year.
That's true. 100%.
Geeky New Year, everybody.
Ah, nice. So you guys have not missed a show. We have recorded shows, but we have been haven't seen each other for about a month now, 3 weeks. So this is a little reunion for us. We closed out Christmas was on a Sunday and we didn't record. New Year's was on a Sunday and we didn't record. So here we are back 3 weeks later for our first show of 2017. Though you have already heard a show in 2017. And I hope you liked it. It was a fun thing that we experimented with. Let us know what you think. This is back to the usual, not really talking about much, but babbling a lot. So, first off, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Catch up on those. Guys, anything outstanding happened to you over your holiday break?
Nope,
No.
I lead a boring life.
I did go up to, we took a week off and did a road trip up to Grand Canyon, Sedona, and then all the way through to Utah to Monument Valley, which if anybody has never been to Arizona and you want to do a trip that really gives you the true desert experience, I would highly recommend Monument Valley. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's deadly silent, and you feel like you're on the scene of Westworld. I mean, it's just stark. You know, it's rocky outcrops, and it's John Wayne. It's the whole bit. It's absolutely beautiful.
Cool. How much time did you spend there?
We're up there for, I think, 2 days. We stayed on an Indian reservation in a town called Kayenta. I've spent a lot of time up there in the past. I go up there to decompress periodically. There's a place just north of Monument Valley called Mexican Hat, which is a great little town that has a place called the Swinging Steakhouse, where a guy literally cooks steaks over one of those wagon wheels that he's got suspended on chains, and he swings it over these open coals, while the sun goes down. It's kind of really surreal.
So if you're having second thoughts about making plans to attend a trip on an Indian national territory, is that a reservations?
Well, it's a true Indian reservation. You're in Navajo country up that way, but it's great, and there's hotels and there's good places to stay. But if you want to get away from it all and you want to completely detach from modern society, that's where you go.
Give credit to the Native American populace. The invading Europeans came in and said, this is our land now. We're going to stick you over here. And they said, all right, we'll make that work. And they did. And they're thriving on their Indian reservations. Go Native American peoples.
Absolutely.
Seth, what about you? Apparently you've gotten into and out of the Bitcoin mining process in the last month.
Yeah, I plan to get back in to Bitcoin mining when I can get a more modern rig that doesn't use the amperage, because I mean, when you're burning over 1600 watts, I know we wired our house good and we overdid it, but that's a lot. And there's this fear in the back of my head that it's going to burn the house down while I'm gone. So,
Well, that's
I
basically
bought,
like leaving a microwave running 24/7.
yeah, and who would want to do that? So I bought it for, like, with shipping it was like 195, and I sold it for 175, and I had it running for about 3 weeks that I had it. And it was cool. I learned a lot while I had it going, and I enjoyed it. Every day I would check on my miners page with the pool I was in and see how much Bitcoin I had made, and then I'd go over to my Coinbase and see what the exchange rate was and know about how much money I made. It was something to do. It was fun. It was a hobby that at today's prices I lost money, but if I hold on to those Bitcoins, if the price doubles, I will have made money. So
Yeah, we have a listener who every time I release an episode sends me Bitcoins, and he had been sending me 0.0005 Bitcoins, which is roughly 37 cents. This last week, he sent me 0.00015 Bitcoins for $1.50. So he sent me less, and it was 3 times more because the price of Bitcoin has gone insane.
yeah, it's came back down some since then. But
So, Miles, you wanted to talk about that.
Well, yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride the last week or so. It's funny, at the end of the year, we all in the Bitcoin community were kind of punting for Bitcoin to crack 1,000. That was the real key number. Considering, I think it was 3 years ago, I could have bought Bitcoin for about $180. It's way surpassed the S&P. It's way surpassed any currency in terms of return. It's become basically better than equities on the Dow in terms of return on investment. It's crazy good. And it did crack 1,000. In fact, it got up to about 1150 or so, which was pretty much an all-time high for Bitcoin's price. But like all good things that go up, they must also come down. And in this particular case, most of that was being driven by a rush to exit cash or the
Profit
yuan. Well, it was more the Chinese markets being threatened by government seizure of funds and so on. So a lot of people who were invested heavily in yuan in China used Bitcoin as a means to escape the monetary policy of China. Unfortunately, that lasted about maybe 4 or 5 days. Look, at the same time, to be fair, also the Indian economy cut the largest banknote that India issued, and that's an economy where 96% of all transactions are done in cash. So when you take the largest note out of circulation, that is devastating to that economy. That drove up Bitcoin. Venezuela had the same problem. That was driving it up. And so all these countries with very large populations were affecting price. But the problem is that what brought it back down again was that the Chinese government saw all of this money, this exodus of money leaving their country, and started to make waves about, we don't think we like this sort of thing, and we might be willing to regulate or kill Bitcoin or something like that. And that sent shockwaves through the community because 93% of all Bitcoin mining is done in China. And you can't, when that was said, the price went from like 1150 to 800. Just crash. Now it's sort of, what are we at? About 887 right now. So we're sort of circulating back into the high 800s, the early 900s. We'll probably get back over 1,000 as people sort of get a bit more sort of rational thought on this. But it did demonstrate the leverage we have to China in underwriting Bitcoin's value. So unfortunately, China owns us, so we don't really have a choice.
I have a slightly different take on that. Go ahead, Seth.
I was going to say part of that is because of how the story was reported. When the story was reported initially, it wasn't reported that China might do that. It was reported that China is doing that. And so it's the fear of the establishment really egging it on to drive the price down. And if you're a trader, hey, good, you can make money. If you're a speculator, that's who it really hurt. But if you're somebody who uses Bitcoin or, has a mass sum and you want to sell, it's a short-term bump that will, the threat of the I can't even say English. The threat of that collapse artificially inflated, and then the threat of the Chinese or the misreporting artificially crashed, and now it's going to bounce up and down and kind of get in that equilibrium in the middle where it should have been.
Yeah. I think that you actually made the perfect analogy when you called it the Dow. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is what, 30 stocks, I think it is.
Yes.
So it actually doesn't mean much. It never has meant much. It's 30 companies, 30 big solid companies. But people have latched onto it as those 30 companies represent the state of the American economy. Whether or not they do, that is the mindset. And so for years it flirted with Dow 10,000, like 1998, 99. That was the big thing. Will the Dow hit 10,000? It bumped up and down, bumped up and down, bumped up and down. Finally hit 10,000, and then immediately plummeted back down. And then went back up and then back down. And then we just sort of accepted, all right, the Dow's around 10,000. That's where it is. And then it started its rise back up again, and then it was up around 15,000, and then the collapse of 2008 hit, and it plummeted again back down to like 6,000. And then it made that rise, and at this point, the 10,000 wasn't the big bump anymore because we'd been there. And we were like, okay, this is back where we started. And now, guess where we are? 10 years later, we're flirting with 20,000. It's going up and down because it's that psychological thing. We have this thing where everybody puts in, say, a sell order at 10,000, right? I'm going to buy. When they hit sell 10,000, I'm going to sell. All right, we're going to put in a sell order at 20,000. I'm going to buy. When it hits 20,000, I'm going to sell. I personally, with my Bitcoin, thought to myself, once it hits 1,000, I'm going to sell and take my profit. And then I thought, well, that's just moronic thinking. Stop being a moron. And so I'm going to let it ride. But I think that's all it is. I mean, yes, the world economies have something to it. But Miles, I don't think China has us by the short hairs as much as you think they do. I think this is a human tendency, not just an American tendency, but a human tendency to look at round numbers and set targets based on those round numbers. And you profit take at a certain point. And enough people profit take, it plummets, and then people panic because it's plummeting, and so then they pull out more, and then you have to be a level head again, and you go back in. And I just think that's the natural cycle of things. I think the Bitcoin we're gonna find that 1,000 is about where the Bitcoin lives for 4 or 5 years, and then it'll shoot up to 2,000, and we'll find that that's where that lives for a while.
Yeah, it would be one of those things if, let's say, China did crack down and outlaw and stop every Bitcoin miner in China. Well, the blockchain would get really slow, and then what they would do is they would lower the difficulty a ridiculous amount, and all those S1s and the little USB miners would all of a sudden become profitable again, and people would plug those back in, and it would start to rise. So it would be a short-term hiccup. I don't think it would be a massive thing.
Well, I agree with what you're saying about market, and to use the wrong term probably, but hysteria, reaction to price points. It's true. Before the new year, I had tweeted on my Twitter feed, which is at Miles W, if anyone's interested. It's MYLESW is my Twitter feed. That if Bitcoin got near the price of an ounce of gold, that the news media would now start spitting out stories like Bitcoin is the new gold. And what exactly happened was that all of a sudden, everybody, Fortune magazine, Bloomberg, are all title headlines. Bitcoin is equal to gold. Bitcoin is the new gold. Bitcoin is where all the gold investments are going. And I'm thinking, you know what? This is entirely the wrong story to tell. But just because the numbers look the same, then they'll make it look any way they want. So, yeah, I agree that people are very fickle when it comes to investments. They're scared to hold something to a certain value. It's all about numbers. And you're right, they put in buy and sell orders in advance, looking at numbers that are really just fictitious pieces of information. And at the end of the day, they don't look to the long-term position. So I don't know. I'm a very long-term player on Bitcoin, so I'm not interested in getting rid of a thing right now. When it dropped down to 800 or something, I saw that as a buy opportunity. But Still 800 is a lot of money to pay for Bitcoin at the moment, but whatever.
Yeah, I don't want to go too much more into this. Financial February is right around the corner, but if you're buying gold, stop it. The lifetime history of gold as an investment is not as good as your average CD at the bank. Stop it. And all those people saying buy gold right now, think about it. Why do they want you to buy gold? Because they've got gold they want to unload.
Yeah, gold requires real estate, and it requires guys with guns to secure it and vaults. It's a very expensive thing to have.
And it's really only
that.
valuable when the economy collapses. And if the economy collapses, bottled water is worth more than gold.
Right.
Plus, there is over, I can't remember if it's 3 times or 5 times as much gold owned as exists in the world. So, that's a scary thing. If you don't believe me, you dig in and you do the research, and then you'll go, holy crap. So yeah, but more gold is owned than exists in the world.
You want to buy a gold watch? Go ahead. You want to buy your wife a nice gold ring? Go ahead. Don't consider gold as an investment. It's not an investment. It's a shiny thing.
It's what's called a hedge. You don't buy it to invest. You buy it to maintain wealth through catastrophic events.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So I just want to say we haven't mentioned it here. Maybe you guys are unaware of the great blizzard of 2017 that has come. Maybe that's not news that's gotten to you out there in Arizona and in Texas. But we are experiencing the worst temperatures in at least a year, and it's really it's darn near unprecedented. Here in the South, and I'm from Georgia now, so I have to say that this is the South. You people from Texas and California and the people with a lower elevation than us, you don't own South. Apparently, Georgia and North Carolina, they own South. When I tell
just
people,
as a Texan, I have to interrupt you and say the Union didn't win a single battle here during the Civil War.
What I have to say is, I tell people all the time, I moved north to get here. Stop telling me I don't know how things are in the South. Oh, you're not from the South. What? Anyway,
you guys are all wrong. I'm from the South.
You're from the yeah. You're so far south, you're north.
Right.
So we've had some pretty low temperatures for us. I mean, currently it's sitting at like 20 degrees. We'd gotten down into the single digits, but as happens in the South. Sleet fell and a little bit of snow. So I posted on Facebook for my friends and family that my neighborhood kids were outside chiseling through 2 inches of ice to try to find enough snow underneath it to make some snowballs. There was no snowmen. That we could barely get snowballs because it snowed for a couple of hours and then sleeted the rest of the time. And as happens in the South, it got up to 35 degrees. The sun came out, everything melted. Then the sun went down and it froze again. And now it's just a sheet of black ice. And you can drive on snow, but only Zamboni drives on ice. So it's difficult right now. And apparently, I didn't know this. This is my first winter in this house. I have inherited the car trapping house. I have a relatively high elevation. I've got a second floor and then an attic pop up above that, plus some tall trees. And the way the road turns, I block the sun out of about a 75-foot chunk of road. So people have all day today been cruising up my street only to get stuck in front of my house. Because they're just plowing along, and if they didn't have enough inertia to get through about that 75-foot sheet of ice there, they get stuck. And people have been coming by, people who come by to pull them out get stuck, and it's just been a big party right in front of my house. And so I pulled out this morning to go to church, got out to the end of my driveway, and about 15 minutes later, I was managed to get back up my driveway and said, I'm done. I'm staying here now. So everywhere else, everybody's fine. To the left of me, to the right of me, everywhere else, the roads have cleared off, but in front of my house, nope. I'm stuck. I'm not going anywhere. I have already notified my boss that there's a good chance I'm not going to make it to work tomorrow because I just can't make it through that 75-foot chunk. Just can't do it.
Bought Seth's Bitcoin miner. You could have just melted the whole lot.
Well, 10 pounds
set it in your house and it would have blown that far.
Had I known this was going to happen, 10 pounds of rock salt would have fixed this problem. But I didn't know. And, the previous owner didn't tell me. I also thought if I had one of those propane blow torches, I could just melt the whole thing and be done with it. I have an invention. I came up with an invention a while back, and I'm not going to talk too much about it because I don't have a patent yet. But anybody out there who's a chemist, I need a chemist for my invention. I'll make you rich.
Is this like Breaking Bad or something?
No, it's perfectly legal. I just it's a thing. I came up with it a few years ago when I was sitting for 9 hours on an icy road trying to get home. I invented this thing that would solve this problem, and it's perfect for Southerners. But there's a bit of the chemistry I haven't been able to crack. So I need, if there's anybody out there got some spare time in a lab, let me know. That's all I'm going to say.
Ooh, plot thickens.
I do want to point out, though, that if you haven't been paying attention, Netflix dropped some really cool new stuff quietly, no fanfare, over the holidays. And I've been watching a couple of new things. If you got kids, Troll Hunters. It's a new kids series, a Netflix original. We're 3 or 4 episodes into it. I'm enjoying it, maybe more than my kids, but it's good. Travelers, really amazing. I've only seen the pilot. That's all. But the pilot had me at hello. I mean, it really, what's the word I'm looking for? The premise is that in the future, people have discovered a way to transmit back into the past their consciousnesses. They can't do their bodies. And again, it's only the pilot. I don't know why, but they can transmit their consciousness back into the past. And so they pick somebody who's about to die, and they know they're about to die because they're from the future and they can read obituaries. And so at the point where that person dies, they inhabit their body. And so now there's no timeline broken, nothing like that, because they're inhabiting a dead person. And we don't, again, I've only seen one episode, but they don't know why yet. And it features and is produced by Eric McCormack from Will and Grace. I really like him as an actor. The premise is really good. I'm enjoying it. So check it out. And One Day at a Time. Valerie Bertinelli, way back then, they've rebooted that. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but my friends, my social network has been buzzing about that being a really good reboot of the old 1970s TV show. So those are just a couple of things to look out for on Netflix.
Wow.
You guys had any experience or awareness of any of those?
Nope.
No. That Travelers sounds really cool, though.
Yeah.
Check it out.
We were watching, I finished up Luke Cage finally. I made myself finish it. I'm sorry, Marvel. I wasn't with you on that one. It was predictable and boring. But at the end of it, as Netflix likes to do, it shows you a trailer. And it started running at the end of the credits for Luke Cage. It started running this trailer for Travelers. And I really liked the premise of it. And I watched it. And it's too adult to watch with my kids. So I had to come back to it later. And that's why I haven't seen more than one episode of it. But I certainly wanted to. But it is, it's an HBO Showtime. Netflix is now trying to be right up there with those guys. And I think succeeding. I really do. I mean, 8 Crazy Nights and A Very Merry Christmas notwithstanding.
Cool.
Okay, last thing before we get into some of your feedback as an audience. Miles, you went to CES, which is no longer CES. It's just, well, it kind of is, but isn't. Anything exciting other than HDR TVs?
No. Well, yes and no. I mean, this is my 3rd CES, and I made some, just from a general CES perspective, like not so much what was going on in there, but it was really crazy this year. 170,000 people, the biggest convention in Las Vegas. Yeah, I know all of that. That's acceptable. It's been like that for the last 2 years. But of the 170,000 people, 110,000 of them were from China. And what was interesting was that of all of the conference room, the convention center has multiple halls there. It's a huge place. But they had sold so many booths to Chinese companies that had taken majority of the booth space. They had displaced from very large players into areas that I never expected they'd be moved to. Like NVIDIA was moved over near where Mercedes were doing prototype cars, and it was all over the place. It was really crazy. What I did notice was it was incredibly difficult to get around because of the sheer number of additional booths that were there. The number of people who were standing texting all the time were driving me crazy because they wouldn't move. It was just this, it was crazy. I felt like I was in the middle of Tokyo in rush hour. Really, really hard to deal with. But you fight through that. I saw a lot of really interesting things, probably way too many things to go over right now, but there was a lot of really stupid things there too. There were Bluetooth enabled, underwear. Like what?
Your underwear
there was
is 70% clean.
yeah, there was some. There was a lot of fusions or slight expansions upon things that were already invented. Like somebody decided that drones were a really cool thing, so they built one that a human could sit in. So it became a drone copter. That was kind of interesting. I saw robots that do, like mech warrior type robot things people had built. Lots of prototype cars. Some Volkswagen had one that didn't even have a steering wheel in it because it was totally autonomous and self-driving. So who needs a steering wheel, I guess? Lots of things like that. What I'll do is I'll go over my notes at some point and I can do a far better wrap up of everything. But to be honest, probably most of the people listening to this show are already sick and tired of every wrap up they've seen and heard on CNET and, all of those places anyway. But from a personal point of view of actually attending it, I'm not sure whether I will go back next year, only because it was so painfully difficult this year to get around that it just was crippling, to be honest. But I did get through it. I did see what I needed to see. There's some nice stuff coming. There's some good stuff out there. I spoke to some interesting people. That's about all I can really tell you at the moment without
Were there any themes of CES this year? Often, the CES people themselves don't make a theme, but you start to see things. Like a few years ago, it was the year of 3D, and then it was the year of smartphones. What did you see a theme at CES this year?
Internet of Stupid was my idea. I think that was the theme. They internet enabled everything that didn't need to be internet enabled. Drones were a bigger thing. They'd taken almost a quarter of a floor in one of the convention halls just for companies doing drones. That was kind of cool. A lot of cars and autonomous AI and assisted this and that. A lot of companies selling charging stations for rapid charging electric cars. There's definitely a movement towards very fast electric car adoption going on. How long? Maybe that's to get ready for the Tesla Model 3 that's coming out. But there's a lot more sort of ancillary stuff like charging stations and rapid charging technologies and things like that were being set up. One thing really funny, there's so many Chinese companies out there trying to make I was at the MacBook Pro 2016 model, things that were missed on that machine, like USB ports and things like that. These companies are coming out with additional dock things you attach to the laptop to give you what you used to have in the previous model. There's a lot of advantage takers going on in that market right now. I saw some really cool things in farming tech, which is an area I'll be working in later this year. I have to go over my notes to really get a real sum of it, but I saw a lot of really cool things.
All right, so here's my prediction, long-term prediction, 2025. Okay, so that is 9 years from now, 8 years. I predict by 2025 we're going to see automated cars and drones merging together, and we'll see our first commercially available flying car. Because the reason we don't have flying cars now is not because the technology isn't there, but because nobody trusts a human to fly it. That's the holdup in flying cars. And they're not going to be cars. They're going to be quadcopters. They're going to be jet cars. They're not going to be a car that can fly. They're going to be small aircraft. But the reason you don't have 7 lanes stacked up at rush hour headed to work is because nobody trusts a human, myself included. I would not trust a human. But once we get the kind of complexity that your average international airport has, with the kind of skills that your average commercial pilot has, all in a chip, flying cars, baby. 2025, we're going to see the first commercially available. Not going to be cheap, but it's going to be like the Tesla. It's going to be a high-end, expensive device, but I think it'll be there in 8 years.
And then 2026 is Skynet, and there'll be no 2027. So
we'll see. All Okay, so let's moving on to the mini rant section, our listener feedback. Rick weighs in on just how many pear trees there are. Says, fellow geeks, I'm sure someone has already done the 12 days math for you, but here goes. There's no factorials involved, no infinite series, just simple addition, or multiplication if you prefer. At the end of 12 days, you've gotten 12 partridges, 22 turtle doves, 30 French hens, 36 calling birds, 40 golden rings, 42 geese a-laying, 42 swans a-swimming, 40 maids a milking, 6 ladies dancing, 30 lords a leaping, 22 pipers piping, and 12 drummers drumming. I think it's 12 pear trees, too. But I don't know.
No, because he's just describing which partridge he gave you. He didn't give you the partridge under a rose bush. He gave you the partridge in a pear tree
We'll see.
that you have to go get.
All right, so continuing on, neat math. Look at the symmetry of the count as the number received goes up. The number of days they are given goes down. So you end up with 184 birds and debatably 12 pear trees, 140 people, and 40 gold rings, which probably are the only part worth keeping. Rick, nitpicker emeritus. So you need the 184 birds to feed the 140 people. So there's that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know that I buy that. We'll see. But Rick confirms what I've always thought, that it is a multiple situation and not a reiteration of the 2 turtle doves. That you don't mention the 2 turtle doves 10 times or 11 times. You mention 11 separate instances of 2 turtle doves. That's the way I read it.
Well, I'm just saying it's not explicit. It's implicit, but not explicit. Both readings are acceptable.
And way too much time on your hands, guys. Come on.
All right. And John Mark argues that the death of Flash damages digital archaeology. He says, I'm into all forms of computing. For example, new and old 4-bit and 64-bit, along with analog, digital, slide rule, and abacus, single chip, and cluster, Microsoft, Windows, and Linux. I want to be able to save a file in a format that can be read 1,000 years from now. I want to be able to read a file that was created in the 1970s. I want my modern web browser to be compatible with any web format. Perhaps we need a web page that can convert any format. I want to make it as easy as possible for digital archaeologists. There's a link here to the net's first web page, as people are always looking for ways to break copyright protection on educational software made in the 1980s so that this can be copied and preserved for future generations. So this stems from my rant about the death of Flash and how it's about darn time, but it's actually not really dead. Still 40% of the web depends on it. And he makes a good point that David Pogue, the New York Times, he's now with Yahoo, but at the time he was with the New York Times, he wrote an interesting article a few years ago that people should not be talking about long-term storage. They should be talking about regular movage. Because, if you archived all of your family photos on VHS tape, where are you now? Or family videos. If you archived all your family photos on film and the basement flooded, where are you now? So it shouldn't be storage, it should be movage. And John Mark's point is that if we're continually moving, we eventually end up with stuff we just can't read anymore. I don't know that there's any way around that. Yes, preserving the past is a thing that some people want to do, but most people don't.
I like vintage stuff. I've got tons of vintage computers. It's kind of a passion of mine, but I really like to separate the concept of the hardware from the software, or from the software and the data. What is going to happen if you got a box of punch cards? How are you going to read that? And yet it's a thing, it's data, it was stored back in the day, but no one can read it unless you can recreate the equipment that does that. So I agree with your point. You've got to be able to take that data and move it into formats that enable it to move forward and freely. But that doesn't mean you can sacrifice having an old, Deck Vax machine you want to keep around because it looks cool in the garage. You can still have that.
And that sort of falls into Stallman, who we'll talk about a little bit later on. His thing about digital rights management, or as he calls it, digital restrictions management, it breaks that going forward. Something that has been abandoned but is still copy protected is now not useful for anyone.
Well, I mean, it's useful for the people making a product who does the exact same thing now that you have to rebuy again. So they're perpetuating the validity of the worker class system. So, if you buy once, read forever, you won't ever need to rebuy it. So I don't know. I think it's just a global conspiracy. How's that for a conspiracy theory for you?
Seth, you stumbled. The book is sort of the ultimate example of long-term storage that is, all you have to do is learn the language, right? So we can go back and we can translate ancient Mesopotamian texts because the texts were stored in a freely accessible format as long as you learn the language. That was the prerequisite. A book, you can read the same books that the fathers of our country read. You can read the same books that Johann Gutenberg, Johann Gutenberg, I don't know where George came from, first printed. You can go back and read those books, assuming you could read Old German. But you can't read a Kindle, or even worse, you can't read a Microsoft Publisher document that you made 3 years ago, even using Microsoft Publisher. Because as they move forward, they leave formats behind.
Okay, so to take your point further, and I think you're onto it, it's not the distribution media that's important. It's what's on the distribution media that's important. So I had a very lucky experience earlier in 2016. I was in London. I went to the British Museum, and I took a look personally at the Rosetta Stone. Right there, up close and personal. It's a foot away from me in a glass cabinet. I'm looking at this thing. It was awesome. And to get the sense that this was used to decode languages from thousands of years ago and understand how to read Egyptian, text, or Syrian text, Mesopotamian text, or Assyrian text, I guess it is. That was brilliant. And it wasn't so much that this stuff had all these pretty iconic, engravings on sides of walls. It was that somebody could read it and translate it, a la migrate the data off the wall and into a format that could be moved forward that we can understand.
But the standard in this day of intellectual property is to obfuscate everything all the time, no matter what.
Yeah. But if the Flash content that that John is referring to here can be migrated into something else and move forward, we wouldn't really have an issue, right?
Right.
So the question comes down to Adobe being willing to release that in such a way that it can be transferred to another format. And while they're actually making revenue from Flash, they ain't going to do that.
Right.
So what do? You can't regulate them. It's just going to have to become something where they come up with something better and move everything forward. And they're going, Flash, yeah, we don't care anymore.
Well, and just like every other bit of archaeology is going to be to a small group of dedicated people to uncover the secrets of the past. And digital archaeologists will be a small subset, one half of 1% of the population, just like paleoarchaeologists are today.
Well, I mean, isn't that, you could argue that, what is the name of the group of people who were open sourcing Windows XP and then they moved on to Windows 7? You could argue that that's digital archaeology because they came across something. How did this happen? And then they're back piecing together, from the clay pots and weird commands on their computer.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I mean, you got FreeDOS, like a free open source DOS emulator or whatever it is. I'm probably going to get hate mail for calling it that. But, that's one way that old DOS programs can be run without, you can't buy DOS anymore, but at least you could use that.
And, well, let's talk about it. Not only can you not buy DOS anymore, you cannot own it legally anymore unless you happen to have owned it well, actually you can't then because you would have had to make a copy onto a modern format. So you have to there's no legal way to have DOS anymore unless it's on a machine that you installed it on, licensed, and that machine still runs.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because you can't have moved it because copying it was illegal. You can't move it to another machine because that's copying it.
Well, you could argue here you go. That since Windows was originally and something you added on DOS, if you have the volume licensing agreement, you can downgrade Windows 10 to DOS 6, and therefore you can install it on the Surface Pro 3, boot it to a DOS prompt.
I'd like to try that.
That would be awesome. What would those 640K or 640-bit graphics look like? 640p. What is the word I'm even trying to say? 640 by 480 graphics. What would those look like on a Surface Pro?
Ugly. Oh my gosh. I don't even think it goes down that far. I think it only goes down to Super VGA. I don't even think it goes down to VGA. But yeah,
I mean, like the original DOS stuff that I was working with, it was 320 by 480, or what was it? 640, 380 by 420. 420 by 380. That's what it was. So anyway, I can't remember what half of that was. And of course, you go all the way back. It was originally 80 columns. It was 80 by 40. Right. Oh, man. I'm old. I am an archaeologist, apparently. Right.
So, I mean, so technically you could install DOS.
Well, yeah, but see, I think that's the point. Right, grave robbing is illegal. Can we all agree that that's a thing?
Sure.
Every archaeologist. Yeah, every archaeologist is a grave robber. So it's true then that archaeology is illegal and always has been. We just make exceptions for that. Because every archaeologist is a grave robber or a trash stealer at the best.
With statute of limitations, those only last a millennia. So.
Right. All right, moving on. Our last bit of feedback. It's a short one. Aaron offers 1 vote for more 10-minute tirades. Just wanted to say, I love the 10-minute rant episode. I hope you guys do it again down the road. Maybe a semi-annual episode. Love the show. Have recommended you to others. Keep ranting. Cheers from Ontario, Canada. So we are crossing borders left and right.
Thank you, Aaron. No, I agree. You know what? I had a listen to our little 10-minute tirades on the road when I was driving to Vegas for CES. And, even I tried to take myself out of the fact that I was in the middle of it. I was starting to get like, yeah, and this, and yeah, I agree with that. And I'm thinking, oh, no, what have we done? So, yeah, I think it was highly successful. But, I'm biased.
Yeah, and that's one more vote to redo more than any other show we've
That's
ever
right.
done. So.
Yeah. The Boris box is now running. This is number 2 behind that one. I keep hearing about that was a popular one. People want to.
The history one we did, which was one of my favorites.
Nobody
said nothing about it.
All right, so moving on. The topic of this one, a little information is a dangerous thing. We're going to be talking about an article that Richard Stallman wrote. Stallman.org/uber.html, and because he is stuck in the 1990s, you have to actually put uber.html on it. He lays out some arguments about Uber. We've had expressed our thoughts about Stallman in the past. And I've said many times what I think about him. If you're a new listener, you can go back and listen. He writes, lots of stuff about lots of stuff, and he's a guy who, amazingly, he has convinced society to pay him for doing nothing but sitting down and writing articles attacking things. That's what he does these days. That's his whole life, and he's revered for it. So I'm kind of jealous of him. I wish I could do that. But anyway, he's got several points here: privacy, freedom. Abuse of drivers, taxes, comparison to real taxis, discrimination, and miscellaneous, which, as always, is one of the biggest ones. But I just wanted to focus a little bit, and we may go on later to the others, on his privacy issue. And let me just read an excerpt of Stallman's objection to Uber based on privacy. Point number 1, Uber requires passengers to identify themselves both to order a ride and to pay. It also records where you get the ride and where you go with it. Uber could track who had a one-night stand. In fact, it did so. Uber has started tracking users' movements before and after rides. There are people whose accounts have been stolen. Uber plans to snoop on users' locations and contacts all the time. Uber has a technical possibility to do this because the app is non-free. It's controlled by Uber, not by the user. In addition, snooping depends on non-free operating systems. With a free operating system, the user could tell the system to lie to the Uber app. The U.S. government can get those records, and any lawsuit, such as a divorce lawsuit, could subpoena them. Uber gave the U.S. government millions of dollars, gave the U.S. government data on millions of customers. Uber's clever policy of not being directly responsible for anything that goes wrong extends to harassment by drivers, and its practice of identifying passengers enables drivers to find out who the passenger is. This makes some women scared to use Uber. This problem comes directly out of the practices listed above that mistreat all users of Uber. Uber's executives and staff have stalked passengers in various ways. If you take an ordinary taxi and pay cash, it will generate no records associated with you, except in New York City, where the government might apply face recognition to identify your photo in real time. And lastly, to recover our privacy and make democracy safe, we need to redesign digital systems so that they do not collect information about people in general. First step, don't help any new ones gain a foothold. No comment from me. You guys go first. Seth?
Okay. So, like I say, I tend to agree with him because of the fact that it's been documented where Uber staff have snooped on what people were doing outside of the Uber app, because apparently if you have Uber on your phone, it says basically when you install Uber, if you distill the permissions, Uber has the permission to root your phone and do anything we might want to do in the future. I mean, oversimplification, but they have rights to your contact list, your location, tracking, all this other kind of stuff. So they can follow you wherever you go. And it has been shown that they have done that, not just, hey, where do people get picked up for Uber, but it's like, hey, this person used Uber 6 months ago. I wonder what they're doing today. Do they still have the app installed? And it's just creepy. I don't want that. I tend to agree from the privacy thing. Some of these, I think he goes a little overboard, but I'm a private fellow. I don't like it when I go and order McDonald's, they ask for my name. So I always make up some weird name just because I want a number. I don't want my name given. And no security thing there. Just I'm a private fellow. So Miles, you can go, and then we'll let Mark lob some softballs at us too.
Well, I mean, I'm with you on the whole privacy thing. I don't agree with giving up one guy's right to privacy in any way. I think that's just inherently wrong. It's not in our nature as human beings. If you think that, you don't have any need for privacy, then let's hear what your social security number is. Let's just broadcast that. Let's have you running around naked and not, with no clothes on. There's a whole bunch of reasons why privacy is a part of our humanity, and it's important that we respect it. What I'm thinking, though, is that Stallman's, although, and maybe this is just a general position I have with Stallman, he makes some very, very good points on a lot of very important issues, and he's responsible for the free software movement. He's responsible for the GPL. I've got to give the guy credit for that. But at some point, his direction of picking one company, like in this case Uber, and saying that they're the reason why we don't have privacy as travelers, it's naive. I mean, okay, if you don't like Uber, then don't use Uber. Get a cab, use Lyft, buy a car, take a bicycle, take the train. I mean, if any of that stuff is not an alternative to Uber that you can't stomach, then I don't think the problem's with Uber. But however, having said that, you go on the train, you're under a CCTV surveillance camera. You drive on the freeway in your car, you go under an overpass, you're on camera. You go, you use a credit card to pay for a taxi, they've got a record of you. They've got a record of you everywhere we go. It's part of living in the 21st century. And anybody out there who works in data analytics or big data and understands how to cross-match records based on minimal levels of evidence will know that it's very, very quick and easy to put together a digital portrait of somebody if they want to do it. The thing is, we don't have a willing government that would stop that. That's where the problem is. And so Uber is just another feeder into a big, messy pit. And I guess that's my point. Mark, have a go at us.
Well, before I have any comments here, I just want to ask the question, what's the solution? Okay, if these are the problems, if Uber being able to track your location is a problem, what's the solution? They have to know your location to be able to know where to pick you up. So what's the solution? If Uber needing your identity to be able to pay, that's because they don't accept cash. Okay, so the solution there, I guess, is do cash, but then you're no longer an electronic system. So you want the system without the system being the system. My problem with RMS and others like him are they point out it's always negative. It's never constructive. His solution is don't ever use Uber. Don't ever use iOS. Don't ever use Android. Don't ever use Windows. Don't use some versions of Linux. Only use an open flavor of Linux. You can't use Ubuntu because Ubuntu is bad Linux. Some Linux is good. Some Linux is bad. Just don't. And there's no solutions. There's no unless you want to live in a world of horse and buggies, you have to move forward. And if you want to move forward in a constructive way, you have to offer constructive ways to move forward. So, but before I, poke any holes in anything else, let me just say, what is the solution? How do you have an internet-based ride-sharing system without divulging who you are and where you are?
Well, there's a difference between me launching Uber and saying, Uber, here's where I'm at, I want a ride, versus the crap permissions that by installing Uber, we can track you anytime and we're on even when you haven't launched us. So the ability to turn Uber all the way off when it's not in use would go a long way to doing that.
Which is, app drawer, tap, slide up to app information, force close. All right, problem solved. That's done.
But why should, like I say, having the ability, why isn't it easier to do that?
Okay, so now your problem is not with Uber, it's with Android. It's too hard to close apps.
Well, it's the crappy way they're written, where permissions, and I know most of the permissions are there for advertising, but hey, we think we could possibly need this one day, so hey, we're going to access this, and we're going to access this, and we're going to access this, otherwise you can't install us.
But you've fallen right back into the negative without a positive. Give me a positive. I want a solution.
Yeah. If I could modularly reject permissions of something I was installing, like for example, I can see no need why Uber would need to read my contacts, but I bet you if I went to install it, it would say, we need to read your contacts. We need to read your browsing history, all this other kind of crap. There's like, you don't need that. You don't need that. You don't need that. You need to access my my location when I launch you, and whatever payment, I don't know what payments they accept. Do you prepay an Uber balance? Do you use PayPal, Apple Pay? I don't know. So I've never installed it because I don't think there's a lot of Ubering out in Fruitvale, Texas. So, but I just modularly reject the portions of my life I want to keep private from you.
Okay, so you want a permission that says Uber can only track my location when I have the app in foreground on the phone. Would that make you happy?
For that portion of it, yes.
Yeah, so you can't multitask. You can't listen to music or check your email while you're waiting for Uber, because then they lose your location. So you have to be staring at the Uber app until the driver gets there.
Or they could be running in the background.
Yeah, well, email can. You can't read your email unless you can do a split screen thing like on an Android on a Samsung phone.
But I'm not a multitasking kind of guy. Okay. I may do this and then, okay, I've done that, do the next thing. That's me. I'm different from everybody else, which is why Uber succeeded. I should have loved Uber on day one.
So Miles, same question to you. Give me a positive instead of a negative. What's your solution to the problem?
The Fourth Amendment is the solution. There needs to be
Okay, I'm so glad you did that. Okay. What is the Fourth Amendment? What is the Fourth Amendment?
I want to see a warrant. I want to see a judicial authority, independent, look over whether or not that data, which is being collected by Uber and everybody else, can be used for a purpose other than what you consented for its purpose to be used.
Okay, but that's not at all what the Fourth Amendment says. The Fourth Amendment is specifically limiting the government, what the government can do. Stallman did this. You did this. Everybody I ever have this conversation to immediately jumps to the government. Uber is bad because the government.
No, it's not the government.
No amendment will protect you because the Constitution specifically lays out and limits the powers of the government. It has Uber is not mentioned in it, nor is any business entity at all. So that won't help you.
But if I have to sign a legal agreement or consent to a legal agreement, I am consenting to an interpretation of law as set down by government. I am saying that within the barriers of law, I'm willing to accept a contractual relationship between me and this private organization, Uber in this case, and that I consent to all these things and I'm giving rights away to all these things. The problem is that I might consent to 80% of that, but not the 20% that says they can use my data for this purpose or that purpose or this purpose or that purpose. The problem is consenting to that agreement is Boolean. Either I do or I don't. What I'm saying is that they should not have the right to put a Boolean agreement like that together that you either consent to or you don't if you're willing to maybe have a negotiation over what those terms are. I consent to this part, but not this. Would you be willing to give me that? But, we can't because, again, it's a legal document written by a robot. We don't have a choice. And therefore, I think that there has to be some sort of third-party authority that says to these companies, you can't do that. You might want to do that, but you can't do that unless you get the express permission outside of all of your agreements. They don't hold any weight in terms of a statute, but in the case of the statute, there is law that says you may not use that data for this unless the customer explicitly consents, and that EULA or that agreement is not good enough evidence of that consent.
Well, the end user license agreement has been taken to court and has never held up. No company has ever won a case saying you click the I agree button. So you already have what you're asking for. That in every chance, at least from I'm not a law expert by any means, but when I've done my research on it, I've never been able to find a case where that you clicked I agree was held up in court at all. It's a bully tactic. You use the right word there, but it's not a legal tactic at all. It just doesn't hold up.
Not yet, anyway.
Right. So
all it takes is one.
Thank you, Seth, so much, because that's the other thing everybody always says is it might happen in the future. Always one. So the only way to be safe from the government is to have a black mask on my face everywhere I go, and for nobody to always pay with cash and to stay off the grid, because the moment I get on the grid, the government, big bad Uncle Sam, is going to come get me. And do what? You're thinking maybe in the future at some point your actions might be considered seditious by a future government, and you're afraid that having taken an Uber in 2016 could result in your imprisonment in 2026. That's all I've always ever seen.
That's good, but how about we put in a statute of limitations on this data? How about we say they can have the data for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years?
Okay, here's my thing. If you're afraid of the government, who writes the freaking laws? No amount of law writing is going to help you because they write their own laws. So you can either be afraid of the government or not. It doesn't change anything whether you are or not. The government writes the laws. Period. End of discussion. The best you can do is overthrow the government, which in the U.S. we have a wonderful system of doing that called elections, where every 2 to 4 to 6 years, depending on what it is, you have the opportunity to throw the bastards out. You can do that legally. It's a wonderful system. Sorry for the bad word there. But the point is, you're afraid, and I'm projecting. I admit that I'm being overly harsh on you, but the privacy zealots are projecting something that they fear might happen, and their concern is that they feel powerless about it. The reality is you are powerless, and using Uber or not doesn't change how powerless you are.
No, but I think we can accept that we're powerless against entities like governments. I mean, we don't have nuclear arsenals to go up against. I mean, I'm not suggesting anybody would, but I'm saying that, we don't have the position of power to be able to face off against somebody of that power level. But Uber's a private company, and they should be forced to abide by sort of laws of reasonableness behavior that we're expected to abide by. I mean, we live in the same world with them. We live in the same cities. The cars are on the same streets that we could be walking on. Why are they not being forced to abide by the same levels of reasonableness that we are?
Well, the fact is that they are, right? All of this data that Stallman talks about being shared with the government is because they play by the same rules as everybody else. The government can come to you and say, we subpoena these records, and you don't have boo to say about it. The same thing happens when they go to Uber and say, we subpoena these records. You can't do anything about it. You say, yes, sir, and you start photocopying things. So your complaint is that they are being law-abiding citizens. They're giving your information to the government because the government has the right to ask for that information. So the solution is never, ever collect that information. I get that. So then you have to accept the things. You have to live like Stallman. You have to not have a cell phone and use a 1987 computer running Pine because you can't live in the modern world and not give information away.
Right.
Okay.
Still, what do you think, Seth?
Okay, let's go out of the stratosphere and come back down to reality. It's not about not giving information away. It's about only giving the information away that they need to do their job. So I went to my phone, I went to the Google Play Store, and I pulled up Uber, and I looked at the permissions. So if I'm going to install Uber, here is what I give it the right to do. Find accounts on the device. Okay, I can see that would be a valid need because, you know, you need to know who it is for payment. So I don't have a problem with that. Add or remove accounts from this device. I do have a problem with that. Uber doesn't need to be adding more people to my phone. Read your own contact card. Okay, I can see because that's where the information is stored within Android. So I can give them that one. There's no need for Uber to read my contacts. Location, approximate location, with network-based and precise location. I understand that's the whole point of Uber. So if I am going to choose to use Uber, I don't have a problem with that. They need that. SMS, they can receive text messages. So is this because that's how they communicate? Is that how the drivers communicate? I don't know. I'm asking. Do you know?
Well, they send you a text and tell you when they'll be there.
Okay.
Right.
So then, Uber would need to be able to read that text message and receive it. And I guess you would send through Uber. So, okay, if that's the method Uber uses to communicate, okay, phone, directly call phone numbers. I guess you would need that for calling the driver. Is that right?
Sure.
I don't know.
Never use it. Don't know.
Okay. So I can give them that one. Modify or delete the contents of your SD card. I don't see any reason why they need
They have to write temp files, Seth. Everything has to store variables. And the only way to do that, unless you want to keep it in RAM all the time, is to modify and delete files on your hard drive.
But that's the hard drive and not the SD card.
But it's the same thing. It's boilerplate text. Your storage device. Your phone doesn't have a hard drive, so
it has. Well, to me, I thought this meant like the card, your SIM card. So is that different? Just because I'm not an app person. Is that different from the SIM card you get with your phone number and stuff and contacts on it?
That's read only.
Okay. So, okay. Well, then I withdraw. I was misunderstanding.
Well, actually, let me take that back. It does hold a few KB of data. Back in the day, you could actually store like 100 phone numbers in it. But it is not read only, but it is in the KB, not the MB range.
So if this isn't that card, then okay, I see why they would need that. Take pictures and videos. I don't understand why it needs that. Wi-Fi connection. I understand if I'm getting data through Wi-Fi, they would need to be able to use that. Read phone status and identify. Prevent the phone from sleeping. There should be, if I have it, if I'm using it, okay. But if it's just in the background, that needs to be more modular. Control vibrations. Full network access. Use accounts on the device. To me, that's a bit much. Use the account you're signed in as. And then here at the bottom, updates to Uber may automatically add additional capabilities within each group that you really don't have a choice but to accept. So I just think there's some permissions there that aren't needed.
So everything you just said there and you're looking at the Android app. That's the Android permissions. That's boilerplate dialogue. Uber doesn't get to pick the words that show up there. They just pick. They have a checkbox that says, "I need these permissions." And in Android 6.0 and higher, that system is a little different. I'm guessing you're using an older version of Android. In the newer version of Android, every time an app tries to do something for the first time, it's required to ask permission. This app right now, in this moment, wants to use your GPS. Are you okay with that? Yes or no? So a lot of your objections are not with Uber, but with Android. And to be fair, Stallman's was as well. It's a non-free system, and therefore you have no control over it. So I get that. I accept that as a limitation of using the supercomputer in your pocket. But again, I don't see where any of this is an inherently evil thing. Why is giving information to people evil?
Well, I tell you one thing though. As Seth was reading out that list, I was thinking, "Oh my God, Stallman's right. Stallman might have a point here." And the reason why is because, to your question, there's no context of why they need it being disclosed in the statement.
This is true.
If they said, "We need to access your camera because our application takes a photograph of your portrait so our drivers can recognize you," if they said that, okay, I'll let you have that. But we need to access your camera, giving them carte blanche to that, I'm not on board with that. That's not right. And how dare they even ask that question? But you give me some context, let me understand why you need it, maybe then I'll look at it. But they're asking for carte blanche to all this sort of stuff? No way.
Well, again, to channel Stallman a little bit, once you've given that permission, even if you think it's appropriate, they still have that permission. So, if I'm going full on fruit bag here and I say, now I've given them that permission, they can take a picture of everywhere I go. They can see my good bits when I'm in the shower. They can see me having sex with my wife. They can see me having sex with somebody not my wife, because I've given them that permission for henceforth and forever. And by golly, the government's going to have it sooner or later. So context doesn't help that problem.
Again, modular. They don't need, and again, it's not so much the security, it's the privacy. Those aren't the same thing.
Oh, good. That's exactly good.
It.
Perfect. So my issue and my question, it's not an issue. It's not a complaint. I hope you don't feel attacked. I know you guys don't. I'm talking now to the audience. If you agree with these two, don't feel that I'm attacking you. I'm trying to get to the essence of the situation. And I believe that the adversarial method is the best way to do it. Attack illogic until logic appears. So the issue that I'm trying to get at here is, why is privacy good and why is lack of privacy bad? I've never heard anybody give me a good example of that. Now, I could go on to say that, yes, I close the bathroom door when I go to the bathroom. That's both a privacy thing and a respect thing. Trust me, you don't want to see that. But I don't see any inherent value in privacy, nor do I see any inherent evil in lack of privacy.
And I will tell you, part of the reason for me is the difference between giving something away versus somebody taking something of mine without asking.
Okay, so let me stop you there, because I want to chase that rabbit just a little bit. Something Stallman mentioned and Miles both have mentioned public cameras, that your face is being tracked. Now, when you do that, Seth, in your estimation, did you give permission to have your picture taken?
No.
Okay. So do you think that traffic cameras are a bad thing in terms of privacy?
I mean, yeah.
Okay. So my contention is, you gave permission when you left the house. You're in public. By definition, everything you do on a public street is public. That's what public means. Anybody can take a picture of you. Anybody can do anything because you're in public. And so I would say you did give permission when you walked out your front door.
Okay, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but again, that doesn't mean I like it, and that's different. You're lumping my distrust. Anyway, the government's going to do what the government's going to do. This is a company, which in certain cases is like another person, and I just simply don't try to take from me that which is mine, because that pisses me off more than anything. If people ask me, I give it, but don't just do this crap. I hate apps anyway, because what is an app? It's an awesome program or an awesome web page that you strip out all the useful features and are left with crap. You drop the C, you call it an app, you put it in an app store, and you funnel advertising through it. I hate apps. They're the one day, hopefully, sanity and uncommon sense will break out, and we'll look back on this time and go, we were tools. So I just hope I live long enough to see it.
So you don't use Google Maps to get you from place to place?
Rarely. I look it up beforehand, so I know how to get there.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, I hate. Okay, I don't know. Maybe I'm overreacting. I just finished watching that History Channel series called Hunting Hitler. I'm not sure if you guys call it.
Oh, dude, I love that series.
That was brilliant. And I think I got the sense, it started off on the kind of, this is like a cute little, TV show of something, and then it ended up with, oh my God, we almost got bombed. I mean, it was a scary sort of chain of events as it sort of portrayed. But what I did get was a sense of possibly what life was like back then. I also was very lucky this year or last year to spend a week in Prague, Czechoslovakia. And I visited the Communist Museum of Czechoslovakia. And what I saw there sent absolute chills down my spine when I saw how governments used their own people to spy on their neighbors, to inform them of things and to misuse information and to put people into prison camps for decades for doing nothing more than uttering the wrong word at the wrong time of the day. I mean, it was way out of control. And, look, short memories. This stuff was not that long ago. What I'm trying to say is it's easy enough to trust individuals or companies and to sort of say, well, I'll give them this stuff and they'll never use it for the wrong purpose. But there are historical precedents that aren't that far away, and many of which are going on in countries outside of the United States to this very day, like Venezuela, for example, where you look at governments who have taken those rights that people have given up freely and used them against their own people. This stuff happens, and I'm not saying it's happening here right now, but it's like the frog in the pot of boiling water. You put them in when the water's cold and gradually turn the heat up, and eventually the frog will die, not realizing it's being boiled alive.
Just for the record, that's been tested and debunked. But
well, I know.
I'm
using it as an illustration.
You know what happens? The frog jumps out of the pot.
Well, yeah. Okay, but here's the thing. At what point do we jump out of the pot? Is it when it's too late or when we have some control over it? And I think Stallman right now is saying there is a position right now where we have some control, and whether or not maybe we don't, maybe we've gone too far, maybe it's already boiling and we're stuck.
Yeah, but we still have the illusion of control.
So
we do, yeah.
Here's the leap I'm not making with you. I need you to help me. I want to be on your side. I want to be a crackpot privacy Nazi. I do. It sounds like fun. You guys, I think you would have awesome parties. I want to be invited to them. Help me come to your side, and help me understand the link between Uber and government persecution. I don't see that link.
Look, I'll tell you what. With Uber, to get what Uber's offering that is unique, that nobody else is offering, if you have to give up your privacy, you have to give up your rights, and you have to give them carte blanche against all that data, then they need to give you something a hell of a lot better than a car trip from point A to point B. As far as I'm concerned, I want to have, free Ferraris for the rest of my life for that level of give up. I mean, that's not an appropriate negotiation right there. If they were to say, we need this for this purpose, we need that for this purpose, and you're willing to accept a constraint on how far they can take each point, then maybe you'd be willing to give it up. But I would only do that under the pretense that there is a data retention of no more than, say, 12 months on that data, and that stuff is gone. And if there's any data longer than 12 months and I find it anywhere, they're liable, or that if it gets used in some sort of a legal case 2, 3, 4 years from now, it gets thrown right out because it was never part of the agreement.
Okay, so what I'm hearing here is that you have two fears. You have a fear that Uber will collect more information than they need to, and that they will leak it beyond the context of your business transaction. Have I summarized your points successfully?
Yes, I would say in regards to leaking, I would say it's not necessarily that they will leak it, that they will become a repository that a third party, a la government agency, another company, whatever it might be, can target them for that data and then use it nefariously.
Okay. So you don't actually think Uber is doing anything wrong. You fear that somebody might use the data that Uber has to do something wrong in the future.
Yes, or at least maybe somebody, it's like anything, the boss of Uber gets ousted, a new guy comes in and the new guy changes the rules and still has access to the data.
It's not the having of the data, but the eternal nature of the data. I'm trying to zone in on what you're saying here. Ephemeral data is fine.
Yeah, again, two things. Context, you can have the data for this purpose. And secondly, time period, you can have the data for this time period for this purpose. Those two things are missing from the agreements.
Okay, so when I go into a 7-Eleven and I'm paying with cash and the security camera is taking my picture, is that not exactly the same set of scenarios? I have been identified and that data is being stored and could be used later. Do you feel the same antipathy towards 7-Eleven as you do through Uber?
Yes, but I think 7-Eleven, well, I would hope that 7-Eleven doesn't have petabytes of data storage and retains that footage forever, that maybe 30 days later it's gone.
Okay. So you have trust in the low-tech nature of 7-Eleven and you distrust the high-tech nature of Uber.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
I mean, maybe it's hope rather than trust. Maybe it's mythology. I don't know. But yeah, that would be part of it.
Okay, so here's my point that comes to all of this. Maybe the reason that I don't have any of these same concerns is a certain sense of self-worth. I don't believe that I am valuable enough for my data to matter. And that's not false modesty. That's truly what I think. I think that my data is so insignificant, that I as a human being am so insignificant that I am a single drop in a digital ocean of data. And I don't really care that it's collected and stored forever because I'm not worth the search. That's my take on it.
Well, yeah, I understand that. But, history has shown us that some of the most creative people, some of the most inventive people in the world didn't live a traditional lifestyle. If you look at some of the people that, who are great inventors, they live kind of weird lives. And if you were to look at that lifestyle and their habits and what they do, it would look very alien to a lot of other people. And what I'm saying is that if a computer program is designed to capture these kind of unusual habits of people and to say, this person may not be trustworthy, this person might be, they're not the, the molded template person. There's something different. They want to do things out of the box. That's not something we can control, and therefore we need to bring this down. We need to shut this down because we don't necessarily know how to deal with it. That's the problem with all of this, is you're giving them the weapon to use against what might be very good people who have great ideas that can help society move forward. Albert Einstein did not live the life of an average Joe. Do you think he would be the guy who should have been put in a detention camp somewhere because he wanted to be, pulled out of that normality? People who are not normal are not bad. And the problem is computers don't have a way of determining not normal equals good. They cannot draw the line between the two. You get flagged if you do something weird, and then all of a sudden you have to explain yourself away for just doing something that's not normal. That's not, if I don't want to have a 9-to-5 job, or I don't want to, have if my bank account balance is a weird number, I want to trade in Bitcoin, I want to do whatever. I'm not bad. I'm just different. So don't treat me like a criminal before you even know who I am. But unfortunately, with giving up rights to Uber and so on like this, they're going to treat me like a criminal because I'm doing something that is not normal.
Okay, you're using incendiary language, and I want to either stop that or define that. You have repeatedly used the phrase "giving up rights." I don't see any rights that are being given up. Help me explain how you feel you're giving up rights to Uber.
Well, the right of privacy.
The right of very specific sets of data. You have not given up. You have not given up rights to. Okay, so let's say this scenario. I'm trying to paint a scenario by which this would all be okay. As Joe Paranoid user, I download Uber on my phone, on my burner phone. I contact Uber. I get a ride. I then uninstall the app. They had the data. It's still permanent. It's there forever, but they no longer have any other ability to get my contacts because they weren't on my burner phone. They don't have the ability to track my location because I've removed the app. And they don't have any other information about my location. Is that okay?
Well, it's if Uber's software says, I went to get this guy's contact details, so I want to use it to advertise for whatever purpose. Or we don't even put context on it. I went to get this guy's contact details. There weren't any. Ooh, that's suspicious. Okay, this guy goes into the list. We're going to check him out later. That's the problem. That stuff will happen.
But before we address that, Seth, same question. One-time use, install the app on a burner phone, uninstall it, never have any other contact with Uber again. Does that satisfy your paranoia filter?
I'm looking to see how you pay with Uber. So I don't know. I don't know. I only know vaguely how Uber works. I don't have enough information to answer the question.
Okay. So that was sort of the point I was going for. So you led me right into that nicely. If I've ever used a credit card for anything, I'm giving that same data. Right. So let's assume that I don't let them take my picture and I don't let them track me anymore because I've removed the app. At this point, the only thing they have to link me to me is my payment method, which is the same as using a credit card. And I'm sure Stallman does it using credit card. So now we've really honed down the Uber objection to one issue, and that is they don't allow anonymous payments.
Yeah, but okay. So what about this scenario?
Galactus 13, by the way, in the chat room, just a new information, says payment is made via PayPal. So you have to have a PayPal account, apparently, to use Uber. PayPal is not anonymous, but is, let's see, it can be both anonymous or not, depending on whether or not you link it to a bank account.
Right.
Yeah.
If you wanted to, you could buy a credit card or a prepaid debit card, and you could link it to that. And then, so therefore, it's not linked back to you.
So, in every step here, and I'm trying to boil this down to the essence. Every step along the way, it is incumbent on you, the user, to take steps to anonymize your transaction. And I get the feeling that this is your inherent distrust, is that it's on you to anonymize your transaction rather than Uber taking the proactive step of anonymizing your transaction.
Well, it's me not knowing what needs to be anonymized to remain private. You don't know what you don't know. And so, it is, usability and privacy on a smartphone are mutually exclusive almost.
Yes.
You can't be, so it's like, I don't know what information is Uber collecting from me. So that way, if I want to maintain privacy and use this app, I have to do these things. So I just want to be left alone. I don't see a scenario where I would ever use Uber.
Okay.
I really don't.
That's good.
So.
But the reason you won't use Uber is the same reason Stallman won't use Uber, or one of the top reason he listed, is that you can't do it anonymously. Is that correct? You won't. If you could guarantee through all ironclad legal contracts that you are 100% anonymized all the time, would you be okay with it, or would you still have issues with it?
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. I would have to think about that, because it just, Uber would be outside of my character, really. It just would be.
Okay. So, but calling a cab and saying, I'm standing at the corner of 35th and 8th, come and get me, I'll be here for the next 30 minutes, giving that location data and your name and paying for it with a credit card, you're okay with that?
I would be more okay with it because I didn't put something on my phone that they can look up whenever they want to.
Okay.
So
Other than the logbook where they wrote down Seth Anderson was at 35th and 8th on January 5th at 9:15.
right, but the way Uber is now, by default, someone can apparently, and I mean, I read through and where they can pull up my data and access and see, oh, he is right now walking down Fifth Avenue in front of Macy's.
As long as the app is active, I accept that. That's a thing they could do. Yes.
And you restarted your phone because it locked up or whatever, the power died, and so when it turned back on, you forgot to go in and turn those apps off, and so they're going, and you forgot about it. So
you're just again you're proceeding from the assumption that they might do something bad with that information.
It's not so much that they might do something bad; it's just I don't want them to know.
Why? Everybody who sees you walking down the street knows you're walking down the street. It's not more information than anybody else has.
I'm private. I don't like it. I don't. I was born a generation too late. So I should have been born the same time my brothers were, and I'd be older, and all this stuff would be for you young people.
I'm getting the sense this is like I'm the blind person and you're trying to describe green. We have such a different context that you can never make me understand this. That's kind of what I'm feeling right now.
Well, I'm trying to explain to you how to drink water through your hand. That's what I'm trying to do.
How about I give you a simple concept that at least works for the reason why this would be a problem for me. I want to participate in a society. I don't want to be exclusionary. So I don't want to live kind of a life of a loner and so on. I want to participate. But I want to participate in a society that trusts me as a default position and doesn't judge me just for the willingness to participate. That's all. That's all I want. I don't want to be putting out data where people will use it as a methodology of judging my participation or judging my intent or judging my actions. Those things are irrelevant unless I commit a crime, of which I'm not doing. But I don't want to live in a world where all I'm doing is being watched all the time. And that's what Uber is describing in those terms and conditions.
Okay.
For me to accept them, I'm giving up that willingness to live in that society.
Here's
Maybe
what
that doesn't exist anymore. I don't know.
Here's what I just heard you say. I want to live in a world where people don't burn down buildings, but fire exists. That's what I heard you say.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll accept that.
So you're not going to be happy as long as fire exists and people are bad. If we can get rid of bad people or get rid of fire, you're okay. But as long as both bad people and fire exists, Uber is bad.
No. The concept that fire exists and people are allowed to use fire, and I want to live in the world where fire exists and people are allowed to use fire, I'm all good with. If somebody misuses fire and commits a crime with it, I'm fine with that person facing justice as a result of that. What I'm not fine with is that people who have a reasonable and use of fire are being judged as criminals just because they have the ability to use fire. They have to do something bad to be judged as a bad person. You can't prejudge somebody. That's why.
Sure you can. It's called prejudice. It happens all the time.
Well, yeah, but this is why I went to Fourth Amendment as my initial statement, is that I want there to be some sort of you have to get over this hurdle, and that is get a warrant, have a third party intervene, something before you can prejudge somebody or that you can judge somebody as a criminal. There has to be something there. This
is fascinating. I've got people in the chat room. I've got 2 live humans right here interacting with me, and I can't understand a word any of you are saying. It's like I am from another planet. I fully recognize the problem is me, but I just can't get it. You're not speaking sane, rational language. It's gibberish to me. And I'm seeking help here. I want you give me that Rosetta Stone so that I can understand you, because I don't.
Wow. Maybe you have to experience. No, see, I really have been lucky enough in my life not to have been experienced.
You've read more dystopian sci-fi than I have. I think that's the difference between you and me.
Yeah. I mean, inherently, I want to live in a world where everyone trusts each other. I really do, because that's part of our humanity. But it's really hard these days.
Here, Mark. This will help you. I live in the country. If I want to, at night, I can walk out my front door around to the side of the house and pee. I can do that pretty much any time I want to. And I don't have to worry about somebody seeing me pee unless they're trespassing on my property. So I can't do that in the city. When I lived in Greenville, Texas, if I walked out of the door of my apartment and around the corner of the building and peed, somebody would call the police and, I would have to pay a fine. So I'm from the country and I hate the fact that in the city, I can't just pee wherever I want to. And in the country on my property, I can do that because I'm surrounded by trees. Does that help in any way?
So you don't want privacy. You want to be ignored.
No, I want privacy. If I choose to go to the city, I know, okay, I've got to find the restroom. But when I'm at home, does it help? Does it help at all?
Is peeing off the back porch something you do on a regular basis, Seth? Who knows? The world will never know because we don't live within eyeshot of Seth's penis.
Have you guys lived in housing communities that have HOAs?
Yes.
Okay. And
I hate HOAs.
Right, exactly. And have you ever had somebody on the HOA who we would kindly refer to as an HOA Nazi? There's this person who retired, who's got way too much time on their hands and walks around all day looking at somebody who put the wrong color wreath on their front door and then writes you a nice little cease and desist letter. How does that make you feel? It's a horrible experience because you're going, how dare you think that this is wrong? What part of, and they cite some stupid statute that was written well before you ever bought the house or the property that you somehow had to agree with because buying the house made you agree with all the HOA terms, many of which you don't agree, but you wanted that house.
That's exactly
Uber.
what happened to me. I just bought a house and I could not purchase a house without agreeing to be a part of the HOA. This $250,000 transaction was held up because somehow, I don't even understand how that's even legal. How can somebody who bought the house before me compel me to a contract? I don't get that. I don't understand how that's legal. But when I protested it there with a lawyer in the room, it was, oh no, you have to do this. We can't go any farther. You're going to be homeless at the end of the day unless you agree to this.
So this is like you downloading the Uber app, right?
Right.
You've got to agree to it. You might not agree with it, but you've got to agree with it, or you don't get the Uber app.
This is Obamacare. We can't tell you what's in it till you pass it. So
Okay.
That's, all of these things, HOAs, I live out in the country. There's 25 acres around my house. If somebody comes up and tries to convince me to join an HOA, well, it's going to be trespassing. And I might have to clean my weapons.
All right, so I think we're, but as silly as this conversation is, I think we're onto something because here's the thing. I signed the paper. I paid the money to the HOA. I joined. I went to the meeting, the annual meeting. I am now part of the HOA. I am an HOA guy because I wanted to live here. And Stallman, wait, hold on. I'm not finished. Stallman is unwilling to live here. He would change where he lived because of the HOA. He doesn't use, Uber because his principals say, I'd rather walk than use this app. So, okay, now I'm understanding a little more your point of view. Seth, you would rather be homeless than sign to join an HOA using this agreement. I think it's interesting that you said, I hate HOAs, and yet you've never been in one. You hate what you've heard about HOAs. And I think, and I'm not just saying that to flippantly, I think that exact same thing falls into the Uber argument. You hate it, even though you've had no experience with it. You just hate the thought of it. You hate the experience of it. You hate what could possibly happen to it.
Somebody having the authority to tell me, having the authority over something that I own. Okay, I understand the government has authority. Okay, but my neighbor shouldn't have authority over my house because I wanted to paint the trim red instead of yellow, or I wanted tin instead of asphalt.
Oh, this is so classic
roof.
because just like an HOA is a microcosm of a federal government. You have the process, you have the ability to go through the process and change those rules. If you want yellow shutters instead of green, go to the meetings, have a motion, get enough people to agree with you that yellow is okay. There's a process. And in my world, in my mind, the blind guy who doesn't understand green, I'm totally okay with working the process. And if it takes me a couple of years to get green shutters, I'm fine with that. Stallman would call that a compromise, a sellout of my principles, perhaps. I call it working the system. I'm okay with understanding there's a set of rules and a systems that I have to go through to change things. And so I understand that Uber, when they collect that data, there is a process that they have to go through to collect that data. And if I don't like it, I am empowered to go through a process to change that. I can change the government that you're also afraid of. I have that power. I have to get enough people to agree with me. But if my cause is righteous, I can do that. I believe I can. I believe in humanity and in the democratic process enough to believe that I can make that change if it's important enough to me, rather than simply opt out, believing pessimistically that it's not possible to change the machine, so I won't be a cog in the machine.
Well, okay.
I don't agree with that at all. I don't think it's possible at all to make that level of change without enormous expense of cost, time, and emotional stress and everything else that goes along with trying to make change at that level at a humanly individual position. Collectively, with a large group, you might have some power. But I don't know of anybody personally who has done it's been like the Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie who just turns up on the the steps of the Senate and says, we need to change this, and then something actually happens. It doesn't work like that. I mean, I'd love to think it did, but that's mythology. That's movies. It's fiction. It doesn't work that way. Once it's in there because it got lobbied in there. It's in there because people signed it in as a footnote on a bill or a pork on this bill or whatever. This stuff is very, very hard to change. Hard to change.
My position is your being on a government watch list is every bit as much fiction as me being Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Well, I would love to believe that. I really would. I'm just inherently distrusting of government at its essence, and I'm not saying you have to throw them out. I'm just saying that there needs to be some restriction of power, and that Uber should be forced to be restricted in how they can use their power as well.
Okay, and I'm a little different. So see, the thing is, we're arguing two different points here. Number one, I would not allow any HOA to come and co-opt my land into their membership. However, if I choose to move somewhere and an HOA is there and I want to live there, I understand that I will then have to join the HOA and abide by those rules. Uber is an HOA that has no compelling reason for me to join. And I hate it when they try to come and get their grubby little fingers all over my cheap Android phone. So there's no compelling use case for me.
Okay.
If there were, I would understand. Like I say, where I live will never be a part of an HOA. But if I move, I understand I might become a part of an HOA, and then I would have to deal with the crappy, stupid regulations from people who are too concerned about their property values than their neighbors' names. So.
See, the soon as I joined the HOA, my first order of business was to show up at the first meeting. It's a small HOA. There's about 115 houses in this neighborhood. There were 6 people there. My wife and I were 2 of the 6. All right, so we were a third. We had power there. We had quorum power at that point. The 2 of us being a third of 6 of the meeting. We could have strong armed something. We didn't, but the point was I wanted to be actively involved in the thing which determines my future. And so while Stallman and those like him say opting out is the best choice, I think opting in and being active is the best choice.
But you have the ability to change your HOA. I don't perceive, and this could be wrong, but I don't really perceive that I would be able to have any effect to get them to modify their permissions or anything, because we're Uber and people use us, and bleep you, one individual person, is my
the process is the legal battle. I'm sorry for interrupting. The process that you would go through is the legal battle. And Miles, to your point, it's not easy and it's not cheap. But if it's important to you, you do the things that are important. So Stallman's principles tell him to bow out. My principles tell me to charge ahead. And so we really are 2 very different animals pursuing the same goal in very different ways. I'm Don Quixote charging at windmills. I'm not going to take that windmill down. I'm probably going to get knocked off my horse trying. But my inner core is one who tilts at windmills. not one who runs away.
And I just haven't seen the windmill I wanted to try to tackle yet. So, like I say, that's the difference for me.
And I question why the windmill was there in the first place.
Yeah. Who gives this Dutch farmer the right to capture this wind? This wind is free for all. You are impeding the wind flow of your neighbors downstream.
Exactly.
This has been enlightening in a fascinating way. The listening audience may have turned us off by now and already been done, but I've been riveted by this whole thing. I think it's fascinating how people can agree on principles but disagree on methods in such dramatic ways. And that's why I wanted to have this discussion, because I knew it would be a good discussion. I knew that Seth and I were two sides of the same coin. We're the same coin. We have the same value, but we're two sides of it, right? I wasn't sure where Miles would fall in. So this was fascinating to me. Did we get anywhere? No. Could we have this conversation for the next 12 years and get anywhere? No. There's no amount of doing it, because I really think it is, the analogy of the blind man. Are you trying to tell him what color looks like? I can't see your point ever. I just don't think I can. I don't know. Maybe when I go to jail for using a seditious word, I'll be like, God, those guys were right, and I shouldn't have taken that Uber ride.
That never happens. That's the point. We're the preventative, measure here to try to avoid you having to react to a bad situation.
Yeah. See, I took the plunge and took the Kindle I bought my dad back because he hasn't touched it in last year, I don't think. And so, I linked my Amazon account to it so I could get my free book a month. And then I went to the App Store and looking around at those apps, and I went, there's not one single app I can find that makes me want to tolerate the crap they ask for. So there was no app in the store that I could find that was a value add for me. So.
Well, I think everything in life is a negotiation between what you're willing to give up to what you're willing to get. And when that negotiation appears to be you're expecting me to give what for that little thing, then all of a sudden you don't want to participate. And I understand Stallman's position. I don't agree with Stallman on a lot of things. I think the guy's from a dark age that doesn't exist anymore, and he's trying to live in a world that is impractical. I personally want to participate in the world. I want to be a part of that, but I want to participate in a world that trusts people and doesn't, take data and use it against them without their knowledge or without their consent. And I think that we all have to abide by reasonableness standards. We're all good people deep down, and we need somehow to be able to bring some of that forward. But let's all be held to the same account of being reasonable in a negotiation. The person or the company I'm negotiating with, I want everybody to be reasonable. Uber's not reasonable. Not at least with the way they word their agreement.
See, because here's the thing. I have not added payment to my Apple ID or to my Google ID. So occasionally on my phone still pops up and says, link payment to your Google Play account. And I'm like, maybe later. Because there's no value add for me to trust them with that information. Maybe someday there will be something, but for now, there is no compelling reason for me to give them that information.
That's fascinating.
They just want it in case they want it so I can do, angry caterpillars and accidentally click the 99-cent power up and go, oh, it was just $2. It's not worth it. So I refuse.
Of course, you can set that so that you have to enter a password every time. But what's fascinating is you can't find one app that you find valuable. I host a show called Android App Addicts. That's how different we are. That's fascinating.
Yeah, well, it's not. I don't have the Facebook app. I use the web page because there's no reason to install the app. Yeah, so we're slightly different here.
And I don't use Facebook at all. I don't trust them.
Okay. Wow, I really want to. I wanted. Oh, you can't say that an hour and 45 minutes into a show. You can't do that because I want to chase that down and find out why you don't trust him. What has Facebook ever done to you to engender distrust? But I can't. I can't do that. We have to wrap it up, and that'll be episode 200 of this. I mean, we didn't even hit Stallman's first point, so this article could be the next 6 months of stuff. Oh wow, you can't drop a bomb like that. Apparently Seth has already chosen the topic for next week, and I don't know what it is, but it's going to be good. It's called Save the Children, so tune in next week to find out what he has planned for that. But for now, Seth, tell us what happened this week in history.
Okay, this was a pretty cool thing. On January the 5th, 1962, the first reference to Simula, S-I-M-U-L-A, however you want to pronounce that, in writing is made. This grouped data and instructions into blocks called objects. It is considered the first object-oriented programming language. As the name suggests, it was designed for doing simulations, and the needs of that domain provided the framework for many features of object-oriented languages today. So 1962, 55 is, if my math is right, years ago, object-oriented programming was born.
Wow, I thought Smalltalk was the first object-oriented language, but I'm wrong on that one.
Well, Wikipedia, if you can't trust strangers on the internet, maybe you shouldn't install Uber. So, sorry, I just fit.
So if you're not a programmer, that may not mean anything to you, but the concept of boxing things up for use later programmatically sort of revolutionized writing code. Instead of always writing code when you click the open button and a dialog box that pops up and says, what file do you want to open? Somebody had to think of that, of writing that code that says every time I invoke this code, it's going to open a dialog that says, what file do you want to open? That's object-oriented programming. Programmers stop writing right now. It's an oversimplification, simplification, and I know that. But the concept is, everything has to be invented. And the idea of batching code, writing it once and calling it multiple times was essentially first created or first written about in 1962. 50 years, man. I mean, how far we've come in only 50 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Think about between 400 and 450, what happened? Nothing really. I mean, stuff was always going forward, but 50 years, you go back 200 years ago and 50 years wasn't that big of a deal.
We are living on an exponential curve in so many ways.
Yep.
Who's the guy who came up with the 7 doublings? I can't remember his name. But the concept is that, it took 1,000 years of human history to double our technology once. And then it took, 400 years to double it again. And it took 20 years to double it again. And now we're doubling at a rate where 7 times, once you've doubled something 7 times, it no longer even looks like the thing that it first started out to be. No, it's not Moore's Law. If only there was some place on the internet or something, some device, some worldwide web, perhaps, of information where you could look things up and find information while you're vamping about the discussion of informations. Anyway, I can't find it. Oh, I thought maybe I'd be able to, but anyway, look it up. The law of 7 doublings. It's a thing.
Maybe it's called the rule of 7 doublings.
Anyway, it was a popular book like in 2009 or 10. It was all the rage back then. But how quickly we forget. The blizzard of 2017 wiped that away. History is gone. We will rebuild. So okay, Seth, what do you have this week to lower my productivity, other than a being sleeted in, to make you look like a better hiring option?
This could really lower your productivity. Tiki-tac.com. Just go ahead and click on that, and it will tell you the time. It's kind of
That's it.
So That's it. It'll change. It'll update. So this is like, it doesn't show you like here in the Central Time Zone. It is 9:48 p.m. According to this website, it's almost 10 to 10. And then if you wait at 9:50, it will say it's 10 to 10. And so it writes out the words and tells you the time. You know, it's just kind of silly and stupid. There
are watch faces for Android watches that do stuff like that. And my precise Android brain can't handle that. I'm frustrated that I can't find a watch face that shows tenths of a second. It just doesn't update that fast. I need to know this. I need to know down to the tenth of the second what time it is. And so having my watch tell me it's about 10 minutes until 11, no, I couldn't handle that. I would
see. And this is what I need. I'm fine with it's almost 10 to 10. So
we are so different people in so many ways.
Yep.
As the French say, vive la différence. If you enjoy the difference between my co-hosts and I, you can find out more about us by subscribing. If you're a new listener, go back. There's 266 previous episodes of all kinds of goodness. Well, some of it's good. Some of it's okay. Some people even like it.
Yeah.
But the best thing that you could do, the biggest favor that you could do for me personally, is go out and tell your friends about this crazy, ridiculous show where guys argue about whether privacy is real or not for 2 hours. Maybe you should put it in better terms than that, because frankly, I wouldn't listen to that. But if you like the show, tell people why you like the show. Tell them about it and recommend us. Leave us a rating and review on iTunes. I know this audience doesn't have any great love for iTunes, but whether you like it or not, it is the directory of record for podcasts on the internet. Google's making a play for it. Stitcher and all these other people, they're trying to do it, but the fact is iTunes owns it. And I'd be happy when they don't anymore, but they do for now. So go to iTunes, leave us a rating and review. I think we have one review in 2016, I'm pretty sure, and clearly none in 2017 yet. So do us all a favor, go leave a rating and a review. A 5-star rating would be preferred, but if you don't think we deserve it, give us what you think we deserve.
You could be the first person in 2017 to rate us.
Yes, not berate us.
No, that's right.
Yeah, my wife beat you to that. So now let me tell you how you can contact us. If you'd like to be like Aaron or John Mark or Rick and have your musings read on the show, you can go to elementop.com, click the Contact Us button at the top of the show, fill out the world's hardest CAPTCHA. That will send an email that gets priority in my inbox, and I will read yours before I read all those penis extending deals that I get every day. Or if you would like to have your voice appear right here alongside ours, you can call 559-I-AM-OPIE. That's our Google voicemail box. Leave us a message there. It will then send an email to my in-basket, and I'll go check it, and we'll play it on the show. We love hearing from you. If you have show topics, things you'd like us to discuss, if there's other things that you'd like me to pick apart in super analytical ways with my co-hosts, let me know. If there's somebody who you think you'd like us to interview, I'm not afraid to ask anybody. I will send
other ways you want Mark to pick on Seth.
Yeah. So. I will send emails to Donald Trump and Barack Obama and invite them both to be on the show at the same time. I'm not afraid to do that. So just anybody you want to be on the show, let me know, and I'll ask, or I'll direct my minion Seth to ask. One of those two things. But anyway, this show is in so many ways your show. We could get together every week, and it'd be a whole lot easier to have this conversation without podcasting and without recording and without the cameras and without Google video. So we do this for you, and we hope that you like it. And Chag says, get Stallman in here. Never going to happen. I refuse to say GNU/Linux. So never going to happen.
You know, I met his personal secretary at the Linux Con I went to, and she said she would I was like, well, do you think he would come on our show? And she's like, well, I'll put it on his desk. Yeah. I knew I wasn't ever going to hear anything back. But
if any of them ever listen to 1 minute of this show, we are blackballed forever. We're probably not allowed to even say the terms geek and rant in the same paragraph around him anymore. But sure, I'll send him an email. I'm not afraid to. But I've seen his writer. I've seen what he requires on a show, and I'm not willing to do it. Plain and simple. He doesn't compromise on his principles, but he requires people to compromise on the principles to be around him on a regular basis. And I find that kind of hypocrisy unacceptable.
Oh.
Way to attack someone who can't defend themselves, Mark.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Well, get him on the show to defend himself.
Okay, before I dig the hole any deeper and put my foot any farther in my mouth, I will say, guys, thanks for hanging out. This was a great way to start 2017. I look forward to 50 or so more this year. Thanks for letting me do this. Thanks for doing it with me. You, the listener, again, thank you for hanging out with us. If you want to throw money at me, I certainly wouldn't argue with it. Go to patreon.com/elementop or elementop.com/Patreon. It works both ways. Or you could use elementop.com/Amazon to make your purchases. We get a little bit of a kickback there. Or you could just straight up send me Bitcoin or PayPal. Bitcoin, it's anonymous, I hear. So you can do that there.
Well, it's not anonymous. It's actually very unanonymous.
Well.
But it's perceived to be anonymous.
Well, it's not. It doesn't have to be tracked back to a human. The transaction is always tracked, but it doesn't have to be tracked back to an individual person.
Right. Unless you've ever taken Uber, then they can apparently.
Then they know where you are and who you've been sleeping with.
Yep.
Okay, I've been trying to get out of this show for 10 minutes now, and you keep dragging me back in. Stop it! That's it. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. We'll see you next week on the Android. Not Android app. That was the other show. I see you got me thinking about that. That's it for this episode of the Geek Rant.
Bye, y'all.
Oh, that was great.
It went right off the rails. Just.
You think we'll get a couple of emails on that one?
We'll see.
Yeesh.
Yeah, you make a good point. I can't find apps I want to install, and you host Android App Addicts. Those are just a little different.
Oh, that's funny. That was funny. That's a good one. I think we're actually going to get a lot of feedback.
I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, am I getting the right impression by the number of emails and the late that we're getting more feedback now than we had been previously?
I've just been storing them up. It's pretty consistent. In reality, it's probably about the same 10 or 15 guys.
Right.
That's going to be the case in any endeavor. It's the old 80-20 rule. 20% of our audience, and it's more like 0.2% of our audience, provide 80% of our feedback. And I accept that as the way it is, but I don't like it. On the other hand, I've never sent an email to another podcast. So, 5 fingers pointing back at me.
Well, I was at a party over the holidays, and a friend of mine who I've known for years, she's a police officer of all things. She comes up to me and she goes, "Hey, I was listening to you and I really like it." She literally quoted you, Mark, exactly.
Yeah. It's like it's such a shock. I actually liked it.
I actually liked it. So there you go. We're big in law enforcement, apparently.
It didn't suck nearly as bad as I thought it was going to.
I downloaded it on a friend of mine's iPhone, and they still didn't listen to it. So.
Man.
It was too much effort to push play.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just I'm the unusual, whatever group I'm in, I'm the unusual guy. In the non-geeks, I'm the geek. In the geeky, I'm the one that's not far enough. In the Linux crowd, I use Windows. In the Windows crowd, I know what Linux means. I can't fit in anywhere.
Why don't I fit in? All right, YouTube people, I'm cutting off the stream now. See you later. Bye now.
Bye-bye.